Hello, and welcome to It Came from the Unknowns, a weekly sci-fi, horror, short story podcast featuring new, upcoming, or unheard of authors, hosted and narrated by yours truly, Ryan Barella. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the unknown. Welcome to episode 4. So let me start this off by apologizing for this hitting the airwaves a little late. My schedule's been a bit more jam-packed than it usually is, but we still made it for Friday, and that's what's important. Today's story is Hell of a Lawyer by Kevin Enhart, narrated by yours truly, Ryan Barella. It's a pretty fun story. I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun with it. I know I had fun reading it, so... Aside from that, we are still open for sponsorships. If anyone's looking to sponsor a up-and-coming podcast, $15 a month gets your name and your project, whatever it is you're doing or working on, announced at the beginning of our podcast and at the end for the entire month. All interested parties should email itcamefromtheunknowns@gmail.com. Also, keep getting those submissions in. We're looking for holiday-themed stories for the month of December. So anything sci-fi, fantasy, horror, mystery, just, in that weird realm, send it our way, okay? And we'll get you on the air. If you do like what you hear and you'd like to support us, feel free to check out our Patreon over at patreon.com/itcamefromtheunknowns. If you'd like to submit a story, please email me your story in PDF form or link, along with your name and brief bio to itcamefromtheunknowns@gmail.com. For now, get cozy, turn down your lights where applicable, and let's prepare to take a journey into the unknowns. Hell of a Lawyer by Kevin Enhart. There's one thing that humans have learned and mastered over time: negotiation. No one knows where this mania came from, nor when. Some people think of a Neolithic carpet merchant, which poses a concern for scientific verification. Indeed, no carpet or loom was found from this period. At best, we could bet on some animal fur sold from one tribe to another by some zealous salesman. Others lean more towards haggling with some deity shortly after its invention in an attempt to escape certain death by a wild animal. Divinity invented, therefore, shortly before the death of its inventor, which will not lack any irony either. For this is the ultimate bargain. Despite a quickly long, difficult, full of boring jobs, surveys at dawn, and tax slips that are too big to counterbalance pay slips that are not big enough, in the end, the humans bargain at the moment of death, sometimes for nothing but a few seconds maybe. Worse, with the 1980s, they became procedural. In itself, it does not really a problem when it comes to going up. The white light, the halo. Even the man the most attached to his life ends up letting it go. But for going down, it must be said that 3,000 years of literature have given a very bad image to these down worlds. Not undeserved, after all, and one could argue that all publicity is good publicity, but it has a knack for scaring young souls, and stress the meat. So hell in the underworld, which some would call purgatory, had to do what seemed unimaginable: employ lawyers. For each religion, each cult, each cosmogony. Each bargain from any culture had to be able to be solved with a coherent and legal answer, and if possible, fast, even considering the corresponding divine justice. Even harder, it was necessary for the underworld to find honest lawyers. Needless to say, this already represents a difficult challenge within humanity. But that becomes an immediate obstacle in the present case. Although hell and the underworld are populated by lawyers of all types, none, inevitably, could be reliable and honest enough to turn the purgatory into an incorruptible tribunal. Thus, and in absolute discretion, they hired hand-picked lawyers in human companies among the living on Earth. Gary Mann was one of them. A good lawyer, although young, honest, attached to justice more than his own image. He was also a loving, gentle husband, enjoying quality cuisine, chickpeas, and great literature. A man of culture. He was currently sitting in an anonymous subway wagon, finishing a chicken salad while reading Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, a book that he had already read, but he appreciated the writer's phrasing, the rhythm of her words, which he murmured like one hums a song. Gary worked all week in a London law office from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. He never left early out of consideration for his colleagues and the files he handled, and he never came home late, out of respect for his wife. And every day, when it came time to leave, he finished his last file, annotated it, and put it away, before greeting the secretaries, couriers, and associates in that order, always. He was appreciated, regular, and almost predictable. However, once a week, he disappeared for an afternoon. In the office, some people were, of course, wondering, but his regularity and his friendliness meant that no one came to bother him. Gary worked well, he was liked, and that was all that mattered. In fact, every Thursday afternoon, the brave Gary would take his lunchbox, his bottle of cold brewed mint tea, a pen, and leave the office. He strode to Bond Street Tube Station on the Jubilee Line, got off at London Bridge to catch up with the Northern Line, which, via a single train, inevitably empty, he reached the Châtelet-les-Halles station, Line 4, of the Parisian subway. Parisians often think that this station is a true hell. They are wrong, as it is a known fact that it is, in reality, only one of the accesses to purgatory. The entrance to hell is actually under Chambers Street Station in New York City. Gary arrived at his station at this moment. He finished eating his salad, put the Tupperware box back in his bag, took a sip of mint tea, and gently closed the book after checking the bookmark would not move. Then, as the subway train arrived loudly at his station, he got up and waited for the signal announcing him the doors were opening. The atrocious smell of the Paris metro immediately attacked his nostrils, a mixture of hot metal, ozone, excrement, and past sweat. He sniffed, grimaced, and got out of the train. People were waiting on the station platform, and the train left before they could make a move to get in. Gary dodged them, skirted a few tourists, and strode purposefully down the halls. He walked to a heavy and rusty service door, took a key from his pocket, and opened it. A row of neon lights came on as he closed the door, barely illuminating a staircase that plunged into darkness. He began to trot down the stairs lightly, whistling a blues tune, ignoring the rumble and vibrations echoing from the subway passing above. Mechanically, he took an identification card from his jacket pocket and pinned it to his lapel. It was nearly 1 o'clock. The young lawyer knew he would spend the afternoon going from client to client, sometimes with just a few minutes to review their file before the hearing. Of course, in the vast majority of cases, all these people deserved their assignment to hell, from the strict point of view of the underworld's jurisdiction. But once in a while, rarely, one of them could be saved. Of course, each religion or cult had its own specific codes, but the basis always remained the same. Gary also had an advantage over most of his peers. He was an atheist. He was then able to take on any business from any cult, or even none at all. On Earth, it was obvious that any religion would have condemned him to hell. They're humans generally looking down on rationalists and freethinkers with contempt, when it was still just scorn and no one came with pitchforks and torches. But in the other world, things were slightly different. Technically, everyone in the world is doomed to a hell or another, as each believer is inevitably the disbeliever of the next religion. Pragmatic, limited by their human creators, all the deities therefore agreed to avoid this counterproductive pitfall and to focus only on peach trees recognized and accepted by consensus. It had taken millennia to achieve such a result, but all the orders had rallied behind it. Peace therefore reigned among all the deities, and even, if rumors were to be believed, a certain good humor. God certainly did not play a dice with the universe, but he played poker, and it seems he cheated sometimes. It's human, after all. Gary was humming an aria when he reached the bottom of the stairs. The neon lights flickered above him, barely providing any light. The air was hot. The young man had never known this service staircase otherwise, and he wondered if, apart from him and a few other recruited lawyers, anyone really used this access. After all, people landing in purgatory are usually dead, and the route is much more direct for them. He huffed for a moment. His legs were a little sore, his breathing a little short. It's just a bit of sport, he thought, leaning on the unmarked metal doorpost. He recovered his breath, fidgeted for a moment, and opened the door. The underworld opened before him. We necessarily have in mind, of course, the image of what the Judeo-Christian religion calls purgatory. Countless works and artists have depicted it over the millennia. Giordano, Vaccaro, and Dore have put their talent at the service of this image. Statues and reliefs retrace the judgment of souls among the Egyptians, Mayas, ancient Chinese. Perhaps reality had been like this at one time, or something like it at least. A place outside of humanity, hell, and paradise, but linked to the three, a river separating destinies. As far as Gary was concerned, it wasn't about that at all. Here, too, bureaucracy dominated, a huge open space stretched out in front of him, glass partitions leading to nothing but new rooms. Here and there, modern glass offices dominated the workspaces where thousands of people managed the files of those who died. It goes without saying that when we die, we die. It was acquired and immutable. The person who existed, lived, simply disappeared. Their memory, their soul if you prefer, on the other hand, arrived here. It was this file that was judged, and the memory left by this person. Memory without life or concrete existence, but fed by those who had known this person. A long pneumatic circuit ran above the desks, spitting out tubes containing files, messages, and information about each death. Finally, at the far end of the huge room, barely visible, large doors opened onto the immense director's offices. Gary took a deep breath and, avoiding the tubes that hissed from the pneumatic system, walked among the desks. Usually he went downstairs, where he met briefly with those who would be his clients and studied their files. Finally, in the last basement, was the court, and its cohort of prosecutors and lawyers, some of whom literally came out of hell. There were indeed few lawyers in paradise. But today Gary had an appointment in one of those huge offices that houses the elite of the three worlds, or even more, depending on the cosmogonies. Of course he had an appointment neither with a major divinity, these being too busy helping this or that human win the lottery or inspiring them with love, nor with one of those immense demons, those there being too busy judging infidelities or cheating at games. Nevertheless, it allowed for a closer hierarchy of employees, which is always good. He knocked. The knocks were barely heard as the door was huge. The door swung open heavily. In the huge office with a perfectly harmonized and balanced decoration were two women, deep in discussion. They fell silent when he stepped onto the Art Deco carpet and stared at him. Humans, living moreover, remained rare here and a curiosity for all and all. The woman sat in the armchair facing the door. Superb in her evanescent white toga was Themis. The Titan had hired Gary 2 years earlier, judging him on his sense of the law and fairness to dispense perfect justice, from which no one could escape. He didn't know the second woman. With dark skin, almost black, and fine traits, her hair cut in a rigorous way with gold jewels shone, he guessed that she must be Egyptian. She sat casually on a corner of Themis's desk, her long robe adorned with papyrus flowers splitting in the middle of her thigh. "Hello," he said. "You asked to see me?" "Hello, Mr. Man." Themis gestured for him to approach and sit in one of the armchairs in front of his desk. "Thanks for coming. Let me introduce you, Ma'at, an Egyptian cousin linked to harmony, peace, the balance of the worlds. In short, she does quite a lot of things." "Hello," stammered Gary. The goddess replied with a smile. "We have a little concern about you," resumed Themis, "which we will solve that quickly, of course, but here it is. We have to part with you, unfortunately." Gary's gaze was lost in the infinite, divine length of Ma'at's legs. He suddenly came out of his reverie with an indistinct but stunned groan. "Pardon? Are you sending me back?" "As I said, unfortunately." There was a brief moment of silence, the kind of heavy, awkward, and unfathomable silence that writers tend to make even heavier with long descriptions full of adjectives. Gary stared at Themis in disbelief. "But why?" he asked in a small voice. Not that being fired from his job here would ruin anything in his career, although he was very well paid, and it was obviously not declared, but he had never been fired from anywhere. Ever. "Well," for the first time Gary heard Ma'at's voice when she stood before him. "We can't tell you, but I can guarantee you that it's a question of balance between worlds. Quite simply, we cannot keep you as a lawyer. It is a matter of order and moral fairness." "Ma'at is really precise on these subjects," repeated Themis. Gary barely heard the last sentence. His brain was racing. A pattern was emerging in his head. "Why?" he repeated to himself. "Why now? What changed? Why can I no longer be accepted for this job?" Then he understood. Themis was still speaking when he interrupted her. Am I going to die? Again, that awkward silence. The Titan gave the goddess an embarrassed look. What do you mean? Well, it's the only thing that could change your mind about me. If I die, I'm bound to end up in one camp or another, and I won't be able to work for you anymore, since I have no religion that could constrain you. This is the only plausible reason. I have no illness, no warning. It'll be an accident, right? And it'll happen soon, isn't it? There's nothing we can say, began Ma'at, immediately interrupted by Themis. Yes. She seemed to unburden herself with the weight of the world. Her shoulders slumped, she leaned back in her chair again. She smiled. You're still smart, Mr. Man, but we can't tell you any more. I know you will understand and accept this with your usual righteousness, but I'm absolutely, deeply sorry. But, Gary started before going silent. His brain was still working at full speed. It goes without saying that we will take care of your wife and family, of course. It's the least we can do. But about you... We can't do anything about it, resumed Ma'at. Yes, nothing at all. But... Gary had trouble sorting out his ideas and thoughts. He was struggling against the despondency that was taking over him. It seemed to him that thousands of words and thoughts were jostling under his skull, yet nothing was coming out. Your contract will end here today. I know it will be hard to work, but I trust you. But I don't want to, pleaded Gary. You don't want to work? I don't want to die, Ma'at tried. Let it go. You're a grown man now. I don't want to be fired, Gary finished in a gasp. His voice had taken on a tone of challenge. He no longer trembled, looked alternately at the two women with a lively gaze. You can't fire me. Oh? Themis crossed her fingers, sank back into her chair. She had lost her friendly smile. Come on, Mr. Man. You know the place, the system, the rules. You know you can't win this. And then, with your qualities, you will certainly not go downstairs, added Ma'at. Your memory will be positive, of course. Your exploits will sail until the end of time and the universe. It is noble and poetic. But I don't want to, repeated the lawyer. I want to continue working. I have my life, too. Are you afraid of dying? We can call a specialist who will explain everything to you. Themis already had her hand on the phone. No, well, a little, but no, I just don't want to be fired. You have no right to do that. Ah, sorry, but yes. Gary took a deep breath. For a moment, he held the wrathful gaze of the two women who now towered over them with all their divine immensity. He then understood why the doors were so high. He stood up, took his bag, and prepared to leave the room. He stopped after a few steps, turned around as if he had just taken a sudden resolution. All right, in this case, I will sue you for unfair dismissal. We will see what is truly right. He left, letting the doors close gently on the two dumbfounded goddesses. Gary finished up his cup of coffee, one of the hallmarks of the firm that had hired him right out of college. Both coffee and tea were excellent. He rinsed the mug in the sink and set it on the ledge. It was Tuesday. 5 days had passed since he learned of his dismissal, and his surprise had quickly turned to cold anger. He wouldn't let himself be kicked out by a few demiurges. He took his satchel, greeted his colleagues, and left the small cafeteria upstairs. He had eaten light. Gary had asked for his afternoon to go to the underworld offices to pick up the various elements of his file. He had notably insisted on having the expected date of his death, which he had been formally refused. He had therefore had to appeal to the law to have access to it, and he had been given an appointment that day to get these informations. The young lawyer was not yet sure what his death could teach him, but he knew that any information was good to take to win a lawsuit. And he didn't want to leave anything to chance here. He looked at his watch. He had to hurry. He waved to his secretary by pressing the elevator button and waited for it to arrive while whistling. The weather was fresh, and a light breeze was blowing up from the Thames, bringing with it the smells of the restaurants down the street. To his right, the Tiffany, Gucci, and Ralph Lauren stores shining in the descending sun. To his left, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, and scents of an Indian restaurant reached him, and Gary thought that his chicken salad had been too meager. He walked down the sidewalk toward the subway station, still whistling. Public Works took up part of the width of the bus lane a little higher up, A bicycle avoided the workers, forcing the N207 bus to swerve. An old Rover with a winded engine narrowly avoided it, its driver blocking the horn and pointing an angry finger out the window. He fell back suddenly with the roar of acceleration. The worn tires skidded on the wet pavement, and the car veered left and right. She hit a gulf, which caused her to swerve and head toward the side of the street. Most of the passersby saw the car coming with its uncertain trajectory, and they stopped or pushed aside. Gary, on the other hand, saw nothing. He had just put on his headphones, and the world stopped at Faust, proclaiming his tragedy to the music of Charles Gounod. When he turned around, it was too late. His body twisted in the pile of sheet metal and plastic of the car. His legs broke, and it seemed to the lawyer that he was flying. The ground began to spin, the sky. He mingled with broken glass, precious stone, fine jewels from the shop behind him. His headphones slipped from his ears as Faust sang, "O night, spread over them your dark veil. Love, close your ears deaf to untimely remorse." He felt his bones break in intense pain, and a veil of blood covered his eyes. His legs and knees were nothing but suffering and twisted flesh. "And you, subtly scented flowers, bloom under this accursed hand of mine." Faust's tenor voice grew more distant. Gary saw his earphones and the Walkman move away. They broke, as he no longer heard the music, and the crash of shocks in his breaking bones reverberated throughout his body. Around him, the luxury jewelry store swirled for a moment, the displays and the shelves exploding in unison. It is said, but this remains to be proven, that an insurer let out a heart-rending howl somewhere in the building of the city. Gary collapsed, a taste of blood in his mouth. Everything was blurry. Even the pain seemed to go away. He barely heard the driver of the car slam his door and flee on foot. Everything went black. "Hello, Gary," a calm and feminine, friendly voice. The lawyer opened his eyes. A dark mass was above him. Everything was blurry, black. Here and there, flashes of misty light were defining the obscure shape. There was no longer any up or down. The form bent over him. It seemed made of smoke. 2 eyes, barely dots, and a mouth appeared at times, slightly lighter than the form itself. "Oh shit," he groaned. "Am I dead?" Yes, I'm sorry. A rather banal accident in reality, even if we don't see so many people killed by rovers these days. Bad engines. It will still make a good headline in the Sun. But I can't die. I have an appointment in an hour with the Secretariat of the Underworld. Everybody dies, Gary. What looked like a smile drawn on by a child appeared on the wispy form. I'm sorry. No, I mean I'm on trial with Purgatory, so I can't die. It would be a procedural flaw. The form moved away a little, as if straightening up to think. A thoughtful look appeared on his face. A trial? Yes. Have you not heard about it? If I die, then my case will go to hell or heaven, or whatever, and I'll no longer be able to legitimately plead my case. That is particular, and a little irregular. This is a first for me. Tell me about it. Go ask your superiors. They will tell you. Death hesitated for a moment. She turned, came and went as though pacing. She came back. Right. I'm going to ask. This seems very unusual to me. I'll be back soon. Do, said Gary. I'll wait here. Death vanished in the air, and Gary realized that here didn't really mean much anymore. Everything was black around him, and he no longer had a body. He was probably stuck, as if in stasis, in one of the last synaptic connections in his brain. That same kind of phenomenon that makes people who are dying see big white lights or see their whole life in front of their eyes. Stuck in his own brain, he made himself comfortable, and searched in what was still accessible from memory for some reading material and some music. When death returned, the lawyer had created himself a semblance of a body, which had coiled in a club armchair lit by an old lamp, and was reading some Bertrand Russell essay. The entity looked at him for a moment, incredulous. You can't do that. It's my brain, isn't it? Or what's left of it. I might as well feel comfortable there. But that never happens. Like so many other things. So? Gary closed his book and let it vanish in the air. Did you ask them? Death began to pace again. They confirmed me your statements, yes, but it bothers me. It's not correct. Correct? It's a bit unnatural, and then, for everyone, you're dead, actually. Oh, it happens. Dying for a few minutes, then coming back. Firefighters save people like this every day. Yes, it's true, even if I help them a little, to be fair. Death had a slightly bored tone saying this. But you've been dead for a few hours now. This could cause a shock. Oh, yes. But I was ordered to bring you back, so it's not my business anymore. I insist, however, that you'll tell that this choice is not mine and that it's not my work, huh? Gary raised an eyebrow with an expression of amusement on the face. Do you really think that people would ask? If they do, you will tell them? All right, I promise you. He woke up at that second. He first felt the coldness of the air filling his lungs, the pounding of his heart in his chest, and, the instant that followed, the most abominable pain he had ever experienced. All his bones made him suffer. He could feel his torn flesh, his organs. It's not natural, anyway, lamented Death again, somewhere in his brain, so far away. Finally, the closet door of the morgue refrigerator opened, and a pale clerk started screaming, along with the lawyer. It took months for Gary to heal. He took the time to get closer to his wife as she took care of him during his convalescence. He became more caring than ever, more in love. Dying had changed his life. Exceptionally, he thanked the administrative slowness for the respite it had left him. He was able to get back to work on his own case, and, although the pain was still present and sometimes made it difficult to concentrate, he thought he had found an angle to attack his case. He was always on sick leave, the insurance of his Bond Street office had worked perfectly, and he could take the time to work properly. He therefore still went, once a week, to the underworld offices to consult legal texts and archives. He was ready. The file was ready. Gary had sent all the pieces a few days earlier. Bailiffs, like lawyers and bankers, are legion in the underworld, and transmissions go fast. The time for the trial was coming. Limping on his cane, he walked along the street where he had died a few months earlier. The jewelry store had been repaired and no longer showed any trace of the accident. Towards the metro station, with headphones on, he was whistling Verdi. It was a good day for a win. The trial had started several hours ago. Gary felt tired. His leg ached, and he struggled not to lean on his cane when standing. The great court seemed to have been designed and decorated with the darkest Gothic visions ever imagined. Some of the statues looked like they came from Hieronymus Bosch's worst nightmares. High stained-glass windows depicted abominable tortures of demons on humans, of lust and pain, while others seemed to indicate divine rescue. Like everything else in this place, and like all its inhabitants, it was humanity and its folklores who had fed the court, and there was absolute terror feeling exhaling from the walls. He had arrived only a few minutes before Themis, while the lawyers of the Titan were already busy. She had wished him good luck in her soft voice before going to sit down on her side. She hadn't looked at him since, concentrating sternly on what was unfolding before her. The room was full, and a constant hubbub of murmuring was heard and echoed, sometimes intensifying with a lyrical outburst from one or the other lawyers. The trial was widely awaited by the poor souls who were awaiting the judgment of their own fate, and who expected to gain some hope from it. One of the lawyers from the underworld, there were 4 of them, all coming overwhelmed from below, was finishing his presentation of the evidence. This was the end of the pleadings. Everyone had brought their arguments, it only remained to finish with the last elements to try and convince the judges. Mr. Mann should have known that his contract with the underworld could not be eternal, literally, said the skinny lawyer. This is not an event he could have foreseen, and necessarily a death leads to a dismissal. He cannot continue to work from one or the other of the beyond worlds. Mr. Mann can only blame himself. Good, thanks. It's your turn, Mr. Mann, for your last argument. Yan Luang's voice thundered in the court. He was a god of justice and guardian of the underworld, as feared as respected by Chinese Buddhists, and his impartiality was well established. He sat next to Allah, goddess of the earth and ancestors, whose beauty and kindness radiated over the assembly. Obviously, except for the most evil of them, gods and goddesses have always been described as amazingly beautiful for the firsts, and incredibly powerful and strong for the latest. How convenient. Themis's lawyer bowed and bent over like an old man, and went back to his seat. Thank you, Your Honor. Gary stood up. He adjusted his suit jacket, smoothed the front of his pants, and walked to the desk, pretending to review his notes. In fact, he had everything in mind, knew every word, every pause, every punctuation. He had only listened to his colleagues from a distance. What they had to say hardly interested him, and he also knew very well the direction they would take. He was not wrong. Your Honors, here we are at the final act of this trial. I would like to say that the arguments of the opposing party moved me, or made me think, or change your mind. It is not so. He looked towards Themis, who supported him by narrowing her eyes defiantly. Gary always had fun with flourishes and long sentences that generally enlivened the emptiness of legal discourse, and he played it like a wordy old movie. He had even taken out his wig from the court of London, something he had never did in session in the underworld. The crowd wanted a trial, they had it. He reminded them the events, his dismissal, his own death, a trauma on which he dwelt with emotion. He walked up and down around his desk, sometimes calling on the audience to witness, managing to encourage the judges to ask him questions or to respond. He was having fun, fighting vigorously. As it has always been said, my dismissal is indeed an abusive act, an ease and a desperate abuse of power. I don't know the reason, but it could have been avoided, as well as all this. Do you mean that your death could have been avoided? Judge Allah asked suspiciously. Gary smiled. Actually, no. We all must die. I mean that the opposing party knew the date, time, place, and conditions of my death, that somehow I couldn't have escaped it unless I wasn't there. On a Tuesday, early in the afternoon, I'm normally at my office reading files, preparing pleadings. It's a routine that I constantly repeat, so that's what I always do. Yes, we know what a habit is, said Allah. We don't see how it matters. The goddess, still radiating beauty, was visibly bored. Exactly, resumed the lawyer. He returned to his desk, leaned against it to give more weight to what he was about to say. This was the moment he had been waiting for. What I mean is that, if not for this dismissal, which led me, predictably, to file this lawsuit, I wouldn't be dead. The audience uttered a general exclamation. The defense lawyers stood up, asking for a suspension, an objection, or a recess. The two judges looked at the human again suspiciously. They waited for silence to return without taking their eyes off him. It would indeed be an abusive process, said Yanluang in his loud voice. Are you sure you couldn't have died anyway? I probably could have, but what an extraordinary coincidence that would have been, right? I don't think my employers clearly knew all the elements of my accident. Death will no doubt have sent them the information, or they will have seen my name on a pending file. Still, without all this business and in view of the elements that I was able to gather, I would not have died that day. Dismissing me was therefore superfluous. But at the time you were fired, you were not yet supposed to die? Asked the goddess Allah. Why this request for dismissal? I don't know. Among the billions of possible events that could occur at any time, perhaps this one emerged as a more immediate probability. We will probably never know. Finally, my defense colleagues made a mistake. Earphones or not, presence or not on the scene, the fault of my death is not mine. It is incumbent on my employers, who by dismissing me for this cause provoked it. Can divine foreknowledge fail? Beyond justice, it will need a thorough investigation. I therefore request the cancellation of my dismissal, without penalty. I am sure that the opposing party, concerned with justice, will be satisfied with this request. He glanced again at Themis, who smiled sweetly at him. The Titan of Justice indeed appreciated, and she made it known by her lawyers that she complied on the judges agreed. Their deliberations were brief. It must be said that the time of men is not that of the divinities, which also amuses them. Zeus remaining champion in this game. Allah and Yanluang returned to their seats. They waited again for the audience to calm down and sit down. Motioned to the court to stand. This trial is unusual to say the least, began the goddess in a soft voice. It is rare that we directly challenge and question both the justice of a decision and its origin, until the death of the subject itself. Nevertheless, Mr. Man, we must constrain ourselves to a truth that you have raised. There is a void in our justice, however imminent it may be, and you have been a victim of it. We therefore decide that your fate is in abeyance until this vacuum is filled and a satisfactory answer to your situation found. We will work on it as soon as this trial is closed. I think the Interworld Justice Services will be happy to take you back under the same conditions until a decision is made. Does that suit you? Gary stood, leaning on his cane. His legs still felt heavy, but he no longer felt the pain. He exchanged a smile with Themis. At the back of the room, Ma'at had entered and followed the announcement of the deliberation, her arms crossed on her chest. Good for me, replied the lawyer. I'm happy to return to the service of the underworld for the time I have left to live. Perfect. Yanluang allowed himself a smile. His voice rumbled again. We therefore decide to investigate and reflect on your case. We will see each other again when this decision is made. The session was adjourned. The defense lawyers were sent back to hell with loud cries and lamentations. Themis watched them being led away and turned her attention back to Gary. She greeted and congratulated him. "Once again, you have shown your talent and your sense of justice," she said kindly. "You are a good and honest person. We are sincerely delighted to see you again next week." "Thank you," he said. "To tell you the truth, I thought about my wife. I'm glad to have more time with her, even if it's only time for this investigation. I'll see you Thursday, then." He greeted her and walked away with his cane. He blended into the crowd, leaving the room. Ma'at arrived along Themis. "A great victory," she said. "This investigation will certainly move things forward. There can never be too much justice." "It's true, but the time of the gods is not that of men, and such an investigation will be very, very long for him. Centuries, millennia, maybe." "Yes," agreed the Egyptian goddess. She looked away, lost in eternity. "He will lose his friends, his family. He will survive his time and that of his descendants, eternally stuck in jurisdictional immobility, awaiting some judgment to eventually die. How ironic that his life becomes his own hell, and he owes it to his own honesty." The end. Welcome back. You were just listening to Hell of a Lawyer by Kevin Enhart, narrated by yours truly, Ryan Barella. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I thought that was a fun little twist. It was a great little story. I had to re-record a bunch of it because I would catch myself chuckling or cheering for the main character. Just the kind of story I really like to read, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. I apologize for butchering some of the pronunciations. I had meant to do a little more research ahead of time, but again, my schedule, like I said at the beginning, my schedule has been all over the place, so I had to work within the time constraints that I had. Did the best I could, so hopefully you'll be a little forgiving. I don't know about you, but I am definitely looking forward to more submissions from Kevin Enhart in the future. Again, if you enjoyed this and want to help support, you can check us out over on Patreon at patreon.com/itcamefromtheunknowns. We have a digital subscription where you can also get an ebook of the stories for each month, as well as a t-shirt subscription which will feature each month's cover. It's a great way to look fashionable and support upcoming authors. Got a sci-fi or horror short story you want to hear narrated out for the whole world? Email me your story in PDF form or link, along with your name and brief bio to itcamefromtheunknowns@gmail.com. Thank you again for taking the time to check out It Came From The Unknowns, a weekly sci-fi horror short story podcast featuring new, upcoming, or unheard of authors, hosted and narrated by yours truly, Ryan Barella. I'll leave you now with one of my favorite lines. It goes, "Let us say then that my listeners are an uncommon herd." Stay weird, everyone.